So Invincible season 3 has now concluded after 8 more episodes. We now have reached an end to this season of Invincible, and we talked about the first 3 episodes that premiered a number of weeks back on Prime Video, and I think we both walked away really enjoying how the season started, what the story was sort of shaping up to be, especially
Mhm.
considering that season 2 felt a little bit more like a transitional season, especially due to the aftermath of just the major events that occurred in season 1. And I think after seeing all 8 of these episodes, it's probably safe to say that we are off to a brand new story, a bigger and better story with Invincible as we move forward within the story that they are telling. And so now that season 3 has wrapped up with these 8 episodes, we're going to talk about it. And we're going to do some spoilers as well in just a bit here. But before we do that, we'll just start off with some general big picture thoughts about how we felt about the finale of season 3 of Invincible. And so with all of that out of the way, man, I'll pass it to you. What did you think about this last episode and really just the whole season in totality of Invincible?
Yeah, I think coming off those first 3 episodes, a little in the middle there, like episode I think 4 and 5. It was only right, I think, that they calmed down a little bit. And again, no spoilers, but the episodes don't feature Invincible so much as Mark Grayson. And I think for a second I was like, okay, what's the momentum look like, or how are we going to round this thing out? But I think by the end of it, by the time we get to 6, 7, and especially 8, which we'll talk about in depth for sure, it it all comes together, man. This ends up being a really good season of television in for Invincible. Invincible is still, to me, at this point, firing on the cylinders it needs to fire on. It's checking all the boxes, at least that I need checked in this series, man. There's a lot of thrills in this season. There's a lot of really cool writing things that are still happening within the show. Invincible is so good, I think, at tackling so many different villains at the same time. I think that's what always blows my mind about Invincible is there's always like 3 to 4 villains that are in the atmosphere at the same time, and to be able to juggle that is always very impressive to me. And I think we end the season doing that very thing, juggling multiple villains at the same time. And so, man, I think they do a good job of harnessing the source material of Invincible. But I have to say, I love what the TV show brings to that material as well, man. It's been a good time, and it feels promising. By the end of the season, I'm like, man, I can't wait till season 4 rolls around, because it's nothing, I think, but good times and more stuff to talk about, man. So still enjoying it. I think season 3 was pretty well done.
Really good season overall. I was very, very satisfied with Invincible season 3. I was critical of season 2 for a number of reasons. One, the split nature of the episodes, the fact that they split up the season and gave us 2 different parts separated by, I think, about 3 or 4 months. It just stalled a lot of the momentum that I think the show was building. And additionally, just to be honest, there wasn't a ton of stuff that happened in season 2. That's just due to the nature of where the story is at the time and the comics, and just like how the aftermath really takes hold of the story at that particular point after you see all of the
Mhm.
events go down with Omni-Man, Mark's father, and then of course just Mark and his mother reeling from that stuff. That's not to say that there weren't really good character moments and things that certainly were built to get us to the point that we are now, but it was just much slower, and I think a lot of people were critical of that. Season 3 just kicks it up to a whole nother level, and it brings you back to the Invincible in the story, the violence, the comedy, and just the emotions that I think we really love that all showed themselves in season 1. And pretty much almost every episode in this season, I was really locked into it. But the way that they ended, the final 3 episodes in particular, just ended on such a high and such an emotional roller coaster, and so many significant things happened to get us to those next steps and get us to those next places. And there was a lot resting on this season because they were adapting very, very anticipated arcs from the comics in this particular season. And I think that when it comes to nailing those really, really big moments that people are looking forward to, that have read the comics or know a little bit about that story, I think that they nailed it. And I think that that's really what people came to see and what they've been anticipating ever
Mhm.
since we saw it come out of the gate so strongly back in 2021 with the first season. And so I'm really satisfied. I think they did a pretty damn good job at getting this story to where it is now, and just making everybody much more excited about what the next season is going to look like. So if you haven't seen season 3 of Invincible or these final few episodes, going to give you a spoiler warning because we're going to talk about some of these things in depth here. So you should go watch those episodes and then come back and finish out the rest of our conversation. When you do so, I really want to talk about the last 2 episodes in particular,
Yeah.
because things in episode 8 don't they don't come into formation without what goes down in episode 7. And episode
Yeah.
7 is adapting a very, very highly anticipated arc from the comics, and that's the Invincible War, where we actually see the return of Angstrom Levy, who Invincible for this entire time, he thought that he wiped him out. He thought that he killed
Mm-hmm.
Angstrom, who's voiced by Sterling K. Brown, but Angstrom has been working in the background in alternate dimensions, alternate universes, to create this new plan that's going to destroy the reality that Mark lives in. And basically, he goes and gets 18 different evil variants of Mark
Oof.
Grayson from other universes, from across the multiverse, to come to Mark's universe and to wreak havoc on the planet. And wreak havoc they absolutely do. It is a bloody, brutal affair, which thousands of people are killed, cities are decimated and leveled. It's a level of violence and destruction that we haven't quite seen up until this point in the show, but they certainly made it feel as significant as of course it needs to feel in that moment, considering what the
Mm-hmm.
stakes are. What were your thoughts on just seeing that whole thing unfold? Because you saw it at the end of episode 6 where they tease it, you see all of those different variants, and
Mm-hmm.
Amazon and their social media, they do a great job at really getting the anticipation levels up for that next episode. They put out the Spider-Man meme where you had the Invincible replicas all pointing to each other, which was really
Yeah.
cool. But once they come into episode 7, all jokes are aside, shit hits the fan really, really fast. So how did you feel about just seeing everything unfold with the Invincible War?
What a crazy episode and arc and moment, especially because it is known. Cecil has said it several times. The Invincible we know, our Mark is the strongest person on this earth. And so it's kind of crazy to see 18 other ones pull up and you only have one Mark. So what the hell is everybody about to do? I just thought that was a crazy and interesting concept, especially as I'm looking at this episode. I'm thinking kind of in terms of like a bunch of Superman, because that's what, of course, like these people are. They're like a bunch of Superman. So I can imagine 18 Supermans pulling up on anybody. In my mind, you have to be hopeless. Like they're all evil. What the hell are you going to do? So I think that was a really interesting and cool problem to have. And one of the things that I do really like about all of them pulling up too is the help from around the world. All these random superheroes coming out of nowhere that honestly some of them we hadn't even seen before. I'm like, who are you kind of pulling up to attempt to save the day. I thought that was a really cool nice touch on things as well. But man, talk about all these Marks. Some of them got mohawks, some of them are just it's just really cool, I think, to see, I guess, Evil Mark really get into it. Especially, it's interesting because Angstrom hates Evil Mark, and that's what you're using to go get this Mark. It's funny how things come full circle in that way. But man, what a crazy dilemma to have. And I just thought it was insane to see what would Mark look like in 18 different versions if he was bad. I really loved it.
It was incredible and it was chaotic, and as I was watching it unfold, I'm like, wow, this is certainly shifted into a whole nother gear, and the stakes have risen to such a degree that couldn't really be anticipated, because you just don't know the level of just the atrocity that can be committed when you have 18 versions of yourself. And Mark is already known as one of the most powerful heroes in the entire universe. We've seen what he's capable of in those moments of pressure, and now
Mm-hmm.
you have to face all these versions that just don't give any fucks about your specific universe. They're here to destroy and decimate and do whatever it takes to kill you and wipe out the entire planet. That's just an unbelievable thing to have to face, and there's really no amount of help that's gonna lessen that. All the Guardians of the Globe pop up, and Eve is there, and Oliver even gets into the fight, but
Yeah.
it's almost insurmountable odds when you think about it. But somehow they are able to sort of withstand this being just complete and total annihilation, even though we do lose thousands of human beings. And that's one of the great things about this show, is that they never gloss over the
Mm-hmm.
collateral damage from these different conflicts, just how many people are killed in
Yeah.
such violent occurrences across the planet. And so it was great. And what's even more impressive is the fact that Steven Yen, who voices Mark Grayson, has to give off 18 different performances in this role. Like, everybody is distinct, everybody's unique.
Mm-hmm.
He's not replicating one other variant and comparing it to Mark. He's doing something distinctly different with each one of them. And some of them, don't get a ton of time. You're not necessarily
Right.
learning about all of them, but there's those small moments. If you just pay attention to the voice acting and just his range as an actor, it's really,
Mm-hmm.
really incredible stuff. Speaking of Evil Mark, though, the crazy thing about this whole thing is that at the end of it, Mark gets his hands on Angstrom and is very much contemplating killing him. But Oliver
Yeah.
is the one who's really driving home the point. Hey, we have to kill him. Otherwise, this is just going to happen again and again and again. Mark, you need to kill him. Mark can't bring himself to do it, and Engstrom gets away. Once again, he
Yep.
loses an arm. He goes through a portal and loses an arm in the process, but he still manages to get away. And we know that Engstrom will, of course, be back in full force to have some other evil plan go awry in Mark's universe. But what do you think about that continuous conversation between Oliver, kind of being that person to really say like, hey, no,
Mhm.
we need to end this decisively. Now this needs to be the end of it, which is consistently been a thing for Mark's character. You have to
Yeah.
cross that line, versus Mark still withholding that little piece of himself that doesn't allow himself to go to that particular level with this specific character, in particular.
Yeah, it's the big dilemma of the whole show because we've seen numerous times where Mark is, it us as the audience. I know we be asking like, low key, if you kill him, that's it. You know what I mean? And the day will be saved. But it's really that moral compass that Mark has within him. Of course, not only to kill somebody, but in some ways to be anti his father. His father was trying to instill that in him a long time ago. Like if you do not let loose in these important times, then you will die and people will get hurt. And I know he keeps playing that in his head and keep going back and forth with that all the time. I even think about earlier this season where he goes with those, I think, twins to whatever future realm, and he runs into a mortal who is going through all of these things. Like I think he's constantly also thinking about the future if he becomes that person, if he becomes somebody who is to kill over and over. So Mark is he's in an awkward and really hard place to be in. But I think that's why us as the audience root for him, because you understand what he's wrestling with and why he's wrestling with it, man. I think it's such a good way, I think, to watch the show, because at any given time we're like, when is Mark going to snap? Is he going to snap here? Is he going to snap there? He may have had to kill Future Immortal, but what does it take for him to potentially kill this Angstrom who has threatened his family before, who would potentially kill Eve or Oliver at any given point in time? It's a really interesting thing, I think, to play with in the show.
Even beyond his father and being so resistant to that idea of just what his father ultimately is as a Viltrumite, and just the mercy that he doesn't show to
Mm-hmm.
particular individuals. I mean, in the prior episode before this, when he has the whole fight with Powerplex, and they're going
Mm-hmm.
at it, and we see that Powerplex is so consumed by rage and by anger, and
Yeah.
and by just a pure hatred for Mark and wanting to kill him in that particular moment, that he inadvertently accidentally kills his family. The people that he's actually trying to protect, he kills
Mm-hmm.
them in the middle of that fight, and you see just the devastating consequences of what that looks like. And I think Mark just has so many examples of seeing when that goes wrong, when somebody just lashes out, they lose themselves in that moment, and then ultimately it potentially causes them to lose almost everything around them. And I think he's just resistant to furthering leaning into that idea, although many of these situations do kind of call for it, and you have to just constantly question yourself, well, when is the right time to let go and to just go crazy and to do what's necessary, versus when do you have to show some restraint and kind of be the more heroic figure that doesn't cross that
Mm-hmm.
line, even though so many forces around you are pushing you to do so. um Episode 8, the finale, it brings upon the arrival of another Viltrumite, Conquest, one of the more powerful Viltrumites. And I know for me personally, and I think for a lot of people, after the whole season 1 finale, the
Mm-hmm.
fight between Omni-Man and Mark, a lot of people said, well, okay, that was incredible, that was emotional, and just, so impactful. Omni-Man is not even the scariest Viltrumite. There's more out there. And I think we were waiting to see like
Yeah.
these other Viltrumites come and face off against Mark, and we have. And Conquest is one of those. He is one of those really, really scary,
Mm-hmm.
formidable, crazy, maniacal villains that finally makes his way in, because he's essentially the guy that's like, well, Omni-Man couldn't get the job done, so I'm gonna come here and clean up the mess. I'm gonna be the
Yeah.
one that wipes out the earth, and or at least takes over it. I'm gonna rule over it as my dominion, because that's what we do as Viltrumites. And he is just gleeful at the idea of fighting Mark. He's been waiting
Yeah.
for this moment. He's been
Mm-hmm.
salivating to face off against Mark. And we see in episode 8, pretty much for the duration of all 48 or 59 or 49 minutes of the episode, they pretty much brawl all across the earth. It's bloody, it's violent. There's some highlights and some callbacks even to the fight between Omni-Man and Mark from season 1. There's just so much going down. There's a couple of moments specifically I do want to hone in on, but what were you thinking just seeing this whole thing unfold, just in totality, the fight itself and just the battle? between Conquest and Invincible during this moment when, again, the stakes are so high, and this has been a moment that's been eagerly anticipated for such a long time.
Yeah, they do this thing. Of course, it's so purposeful and it's definitely intentional. But they are like, I was watching this like, oh my god, not Chicago all over. That's all I could. That's what I was thinking the whole time. And part of me is like, dang, why are they doing this again? But as you watch it and you see Invincible, it's almost like another chance for Mark. In some ways, to not to completely rectify what happened between him and his dad in the season 1 finale, but in some ways to say, hey, you're a different person now. This is another Viltrumite kind of wanting the same things. What are you going to do and how are you going to do it? And so man, that entire fight, I'm like, this dude Conquest is sick. And we knew, I think that's the thing about Mark's dad, is we knew he kind of had as evil as he was, he still had a version of him that was like keen to loving Earth in some kind of way, as crazy atrocities as he had. This dude Conquest said, no, all the other Viltrumites are afraid of me. Like, this I'm ridiculous. You've never seen anything like me before. I take pride in this. This is what I do. And after hearing that, I said, oh no, this dude is sick. So I just love, I think, watching, just taking that lid off of, like, you thought you seen the most unhinged Viltrumite. You've never seen it before. And that was honestly my favorite part about the fight. What will Conquest do next? What is the craziest thing he's going to do? And he didn't care about anybody or anything. And I think that's what I loved about the fight the most. He's trying to rip people in half. He's throwing Mark through other human beings. It's just, it was crazy, I think, to watch. I think the amount of in lack of restraint, I think, that this man had.
Yeah, first of all, shout out to Robert Kirkman and their entire team. They brought in Jeffrey Dean Morgan to voice
Genius.
Conquest, and folks and fans of The Walking Dead will know that this was sort of a meta rematch between two characters from The Walking Dead, because in that series, spoiler alert if you've not seen it, but Negan, portrayed by Jeffrey Dean Morgan, when he enters the show, when he makes his grand entrance, he kills the character of Glenn, played by Stephen Yen, in that series.
Yep.
And so all these years later, in another Robert Kirkman creation, essentially, they've had the chance to have this rematch between Mark Grayson and Conquest. And it was fascinating. It was phenomenal. It was brutal, of course. I mean, the levels of brutality, even in an animated show, you just have to look at it and say, like, wow, this is disturbingly violent at several moments. Like, I don't even enjoy this anymore. There are things that are happening here that I just look, and I'm also just like very cringy, and I'm very just thinking like, they're taking this to just a whole nother level of just brutality here, and it's necessary. That's the point of these stories that they're telling. That, yeah, the killing for the Viltrumites and specifically, that stuff is typically for fun, but when you actually see it unfold and you see the collateral damage, that's the horrific aspect of it, where it's like, no, there are a lot of lives at stake, and people, innocent bystanders, are being killed left and right. And that callback when he takes Mark and he just flies through the crowd of people, and you see their limbs and their body parts just completely flying off of their bodies, calling back to the same thing that Omni-Man did to Mark in season 1 in that finale. It was just like, wow, these are all sadistic fucks. They're all just crazy as hell. And, it results into, some very, very emotional things that happen as they start to conclude the fight. A couple of things. There's the threat potentially of Eve dying, although she doesn't die. We know that she can sort of restore body parts and matter, things of that nature. But that's a really emotional moment for Mark, where he does lose it. He snaps completely, and he just lets loose, and that's what is able to give him the power to overcome Conquest. But even before that moment, because to be honest, for the entire episode, we don't even know a thing about Conquest. We don't know who he is. We don't learn anything about him until a small moment when he has Mark pinned to the ground and he's whispering to him, and he's talking to him, and he's like, I'm really lonely. I don't have any friends. Nobody talks to me. Everybody's scared of me. They don't understand me. They just don't get me as a person. And so now he's just relishing in this moment to wax poetic and to be in this confessive state about just his plight and what he deals with, while he's about to murder essentially a 19-year-old kid. It's really, really crazy. He just ripped out his girlfriend's intestines. Like, this is all just like wild stuff, but it adds that depth, I think, to the character that we had not seen, because prior to this, he's just a a named villain that we know nothing about. But here's where
Yeah.
we get to learn a little bit more about him and who he is as a person and what he's been dealing with. What were your thoughts on just like hearing that stuff unfold, just considering the context, obviously the crazy situation around them, but also it does add a little bit of humanity to who he is as a person.
Yeah, I mean, again, I think we're made to believe that a lot of these Viltrumites, at least in the beginning, don't really feel anything, and that they're really out to I guess, of course, conquer these planets again, to find they're trying to find a home. But we the whole time we're like, do these people feel anything? Do they have any emotion, or are they just legit a warrior race who only kills about, for lack of a better term, conquest? And so it's interesting seeing conquest being like actually have feelings, and actually, of course he's on the crazy side of those feelings, but actually have feelings and actually have thoughts on what's going on in the world, and feeling like that what he tells Mark in that moment that he couldn't tell anybody else, so much so that he tells Mark. And the scary part for me is when he whispered, "Now take it to your grave." I said, "What?" This dude is actually insane. And it's almost like, as much as he enjoyed fighting Mark, he also enjoyed being able to vent to him before he died, because he's saying things that he's never said to anybody else before. But yeah, it's a really, it's so interesting how those small moments sometimes is all you need to give a character some depth. Because in that moment, I'm like, yeah, it makes sense why you're lonely. It makes sense why are you as crazy as you are, and honestly, why people don't mess with you. Because if you whisper into anybody stuff like that, dude, you're unhinged on another level that the Viltrumites don't understand, which is exactly the case. So, man, I thought it was a really crazy moment, but honestly, one of my favorite moments of the episode.
There was the part before we even get to that section. There was the part when they're fighting in space,
Mhm.
and Conquest, there's a drop of blood that falls off of him, and he takes the blood and shapes it into a heart as it's crystallizing in space. Like that, just like absurd, sick shit like that. It's just like, dude, you are off the rails. I don't know how
Mhm.
to call it. I don't know how to judge you, but I just know based on that act, like you find this so fun and so enjoyable. This is a sport to you. You're
Yeah.
playing with people's lives. That's just another level entirely. I mean, we've known this about the Viltrumites this entire time, but to see it in action, it all manifests really in that conversation. This warped sense of justification that they have, this righteousness that they sort of live their lives by because they are superior beings and
Yeah.
all that stuff. You really see it take shape when everybody around them and everything around them is as disposable as a piece of trash on the street. It means nothing to them, and
Mhm.
it's scary stuff. And a lot is at stake. And Oliver almost loses his life. Conquest nearly rips him in half. We do see Adam Eve ultimately rebound and bounce back and kind of becomes an even better version of herself. And so it really all sort of foils down into to Mark defeating Conquest and using his own head to just bash his brains in again, losing it and just
Mhm.
snapping in that moment. The violence is just crazy at the height of this dramatic sequence. But at the end of the day, he does defeat him at least temporarily in this moment. And so
Yeah.
we do see the funeral of Rex at the end of this episode. That was a major character that we lost due to
Yeah.
the Invincible War. And there were some other things that sort of happened over the course of these past few episodes. And so anything you want to just call out specifically about how this season wrapped up and concluded, and also what it might sort of portend for the next season, because there are, believe it or not, there are even more crazy arcs to come.
Yeah.
There are more wars to be had, and
Mhm.
I'm gonna be here to say it again that Conquest is still not even the worst Viltrumite that we've met. Just wait until
Yep.
we meet Thrag, who's gonna
Yep.
come. I would believe next season we're gonna see him. So there are more to meet. There's more craziness to happen, of course, within this show. But what else do you want to call out just about these final few episodes? Any moments, characters, or sequences that took place?
Yeah. Man, Rex. You just brought up Rex. How I'm really sad. We start off with Rex, and Rex is somewhat of an asshole, and you're like, man, this guy here. But over the course of, I think, middle season two and in towards the end of this season, you start to like Rex. He starts to become, a little more human for us, and a little less of an asshole for us. And he does do things that are heroic, and when you lose him, it does hurt a little bit. It's like, dang, we lost Rex, man. As much of an asshole as he was, he was, he was our asshole. So it kind of sucks, I think, to see him go. And that funeral was sad, man. And I think about what's the robot's name? I always forget. How he cloned his body, Rudy. How Rudy cloned his body, and he decided to name himself Rex. Is that okay? Like, is that, can we just do that? Can we just say my name is Rex now? I think that's kind of crazy and kind of weird that we could just call him Rex now. And the other thing, did you see the IMDb score for this episode? Crazy. It got,
Yeah, IMDb. I mean,
yeah, I'm like,
eh.
whoa, that's kind of high. It got like a 9.9.
Recency bias is a thing. It is what it
Yeah, I
is.
was like, we kind of tripping here. It said it was up there with like Connor's wedding and the Battle of the Bastards. I'm like, I don't know, whatever. Like you said, recency bias, if y'all say so, man. But yeah, by the end of it, I think, Adam Eve realizing she's OP. I think that's interesting. She's a god now. Crazy. But all those things considered, race considered, man, it was just I think a really emotional, high stakes season. Can't wait to see season 4. Like you said, Thrag is coming. Battle Beast is just, I'm ready to see him back in action. To be honest, I really like Battle Beast. So yeah, man, excited what's to come. I think they're cooking right now.
Yeah, they're staying very faithful to the comics for the most part. I think in all the right places they do transform a few things here and there, but I think in the places that it matters, we do see them staying faithful. They are introducing a completely new original storyline though for next season,
Mm-hmm.
and that was teased in I guess the mid credit scene. This is something that's going to be completely new that's not in the
Mm-hmm.
comics. This whole Damien Darkblood situation and what's going on
Mm-hmm.
there. Thrag is on the way. Dinosaurs are afoot. There are things coming with that. And,
Mm-hmm.
I think outside of the Rex stuff, that was a really great arc this season that I liked as well. I'm still a big fan of what they did with Cecil as well earlier this
Yeah.
season.
Mm-hmm.
Just unpacking his backstory, really diving into his history, and then just seeing how that relationship between him and Mark continued to evolve. I mean, there's even in this episode when Mark thinks that Eve is dying, he calls out to Cecil, like he screams and pleads, like you need
Mm-hmm.
to help me. So it just goes to show like there's still so much history between those two, and there is still kind of a necessity that they work together, especially in these moments, because Cecil is very aware of just all the stuff that's at stake here. I think my only drawback is that I just would have liked to see a little bit more stuff with Alan in in this
Mm-hmm.
season, and
Yeah.
also Omni-Man, of course. Like we saw them
Mm-hmm.
briefly for a glimpse, but the season still managed to continue to be very entertaining without their presence, which does speak to just like the quality of the characters that they've built in this stable and in this ensemble. The fact that they weren't really around, it's a testament to the fact that they held our attention this entire season. But I would have liked to see a little bit more of them, but I know that there is more to come with their
Yeah.
storylines. But overall, Invincible, they're doing really, really good stuff, and I think that they rebounded in all the right ways this season after, I would say, somewhat of a lackluster season 2, but going into season 3 and now heading into season 4 whenever we do get it, the stakes are as high as they could be, and it's as exciting as it's been, I think, since we got the introduction of the show all those years ago. So we will certainly have to see. But folks, those are all of our thoughts on the season 3 finale of Invincible. If you've checked out these final few episodes, hit us up and let us know what you think about them.